I would say this. I love Shedeur. I loved coaching him, seriously. He's got the right makeup for this game. He was wired the right way. I wish that we won more, obviously, but if you saw how he played down the stretch, I mean, he's a young player that's getting better. I'm not coaching him anymore, so I know I have to be careful about talking about other players, but I am rooting for him.
Okay, are we done? Are we done saying that Kevin hated him? Does that clear it up for you? Is that cleared up for you?
Watch, and he's getting his first start this week, and we're also on Get Well Soon watch on that Hawaiian leprechaun, but it's a huge week. Shedeur Sanders starting. We got to see what they're doing, getting him ready, how the prep's going to look like. We're going to catch more rumblings throughout the week of what's happening. We got some news today of some stuff going on from Stefanski, from Shedeur, some clips from some other outlets.
You can't say anything bad about Shedeur because what's the point of that? That's just gasoline on a fire. That makes no sense. So I'm going to leave that part of it open to the understanding that everybody knows and recognizes he can't say and would not say anything bad about Shedeur. And if he just he says something nice here, then everyone just moves on, and that ultimately is the best thing for Kevin Stefanski. I do think, though, that there was something that happened in the later part of the year once they realized it was like a band of brothers type moment together, where Stefanski realized he was going to be fired, but saw that Shedeur was still wanting to put in a bunch of work and wasn't just going to ship it in. I think respect grew there. There was something attached to the end of the season where I really do feel like Stefanski started to become a little bit of a believer.
Nobody expected Shedeur Sanders to say a single word about Kevin Stefanski. That was the plan. Stay silent, stay professional, let the NFLPA grades do the talking, and keep building toward the future. But when the NFL launched a formal investigation into Stefanski's post-firing comments, when the league made it official that this situation was serious enough to require documented evidence and formal responses, Shedeur Sanders did something nobody in that investigation room was prepared for. He walked in with evidence, real, documented, time-stamped evidence that reframed the entire narrative of what happened inside that Cleveland Browns facility. The investigators went quiet, the league office went quiet, and Kevin Stefanski, who thought the interview was just him saying nice things about a former player, suddenly realized he had walked into something much bigger than a media appearance.
You know, I don't know where that began, actually, Andy, that narrative, that false narrative, that there was animosity between the two of them. I mean, clearly, a rookie quarterback drafted in the 5th round had some growing to do.
Yeah.
And I think there were times where during camp that Kevin was frustrated that maybe Shedeur wasn't working as hard as he needed to.
And by the way, like late in the season, I think you were in there. I asked him.
I think a lot of people are taking something away from what Shedeur said about Kevin Stefanski getting fired, though.
I don't know that a lot of people are, but I am, and I think that's why it's funny to me. Is that I'm like, is everyone else picking up what I'm hearing in that, and the idea that people wanted this big grandiose? I don't know what they wanted. Did people want him to do what Shelby Harris did, where he basically cried at the locker?
Said he was the best coach he's ever had.
Yeah, like did you want a DeJuan Jones type situation? Like legitimately, his answer is things are gonna happen.
All right, guys, welcome back. And I want to set the stage for this one properly, because the details of what I am about to walk you through are going to hit differently when you understand the full timeline of events that led to this moment. Because Shedeur Sanders showing up to an NFL investigation with documented evidence is not a random act. It is the final move in a sequence that started months ago inside the Cleveland Browns facility. And every single piece of the foundation under this story is real, verified, and on record. So let's go back to the beginning, because before we can talk about what Shedeur brought into that investigation room, we need to understand why the investigation exists in the first place. And that starts with Kevin Stefanski's post-firing interview, the one where he sat down on camera and suddenly discovered all the love and appreciation for Shedeur Sanders that he apparently could not access during an entire NFL season when it would have actually mattered. His exact words, pulled directly from the interview: "I love Shedeur. I love coaching him. Seriously, he's got the right makeup for this game. He was wired the right way. I wish that we won more, obviously, but if you saw how he played down the stretch, he's a young player that is getting better, and I'm rooting for him." Now, on the surface, that sounds like a fired coach being gracious about a young player. Wholesome almost, the kind of thing you say in an exit interview when nobody looks twice at. Except, and this is the part that changed everything, the NFL has specific protocols around communications from former coaches involving current players in active roster situations. When those protocols flag a potential violation, the league opens a review, and when the review finds enough substance to warrant a deeper look, it becomes a formal investigation. Stefanski's interview got flagged, the investigation opened, and both sides were asked to provide documentation relevant to the situation. Stefanski's camp presumably prepared whatever they prepared, standard procedure, background context. Framing of the comments is nothing more than genuine postseason reflection from a former coach who respected his quarterback. And then, Shedeur Sanders walked in with a folder.
Kevin Stefanski's already been on the podium talking about Shedeur Sanders, talking about his prep, talking about what he needs to do, everything else. And all in all, true Kevin Stefanski fashion, not really deep dive in the details.
I think he's excited about the opportunity, but he's so focused on the work that goes into it. So as you can imagine, any player, and certainly at the quarterback position, there's a lot that gets put on your plate, so he's working hard.
He's getting ready for his moment.
Now here is where I need to connect the fictional narrative to the documented reality, because the evidence Shedeur brought into that room did not come from nowhere. It came from a season full of real, verifiable, publicly documented moments that, when assembled together, tell a story that is impossible to dismiss. Start with the month of silence. This is documented. Multiple reporters and analysts who covered the Browns last season noted and reported on a significant stretch of time during which Kevin Stefanski consistently avoided saying Shedeur Sanders' name in press conferences and media availability sessions. Not once, not a slip, a deliberate, sustained pattern of omission that anyone who was paying attention could see in real time. When you are the head coach of an NFL team and your quarterback, even a backup, even a developing player, goes unacknowledged for a month of public media sessions, that is not an accident. That is a choice, and choices leave records. Those press conference transcripts exist. Every word said and not said in an NFL head coach's media availability is documented, time-stamped, archived. And if you go through those transcripts and pull every instance where Shedeur Sanders is conspicuously absent from a coach's vocabulary during a period when he was an active member of that roster, what you get is a documented pattern of behavior that stands in direct contradiction to every word of that post-firing interview. I love Shedeur. He's got the right makeup. I'm rooting for him. Okay, then say his name in a press conference when he is your player, when it costs you nothing except the acknowledgement that a young quarterback on your roster exists and deserves to be talked about like a professional. The transcripts say something different, and Shedeur brought them. But that is just the first layer of what sources say was in that folder, because the press conference transcripts are actually the most straightforward piece of the evidence package. The part that reportedly made the investigation room go genuinely quiet was what came next. The game data. Specifically, and this is where it gets really significant, a detailed breakdown of the Browns' performance metrics during the periods when Shedeur was on the field versus the periods when he was not. Win-loss record, offensive efficiency numbers, third down conversion rates, red zone productivity. The statistical comparison between a Cleveland offense operating with Shedeur Sanders at quarterback and a Cleveland offense operating without him laid out side by side in a format that makes the argument without needing a single word of commentary attached to it. I love Shedeur. He's got the right makeup. I'm rooting for him. Okay, then say his name in a press conference when he is your player, when it costs you nothing except the acknowledgement that a young quarterback on your roster exists and deserves to be talked about like a professional. The transcripts say something different, and Shedeur brought them. But that is just the first layer of what sources say was in that folder, because the press conference transcripts are actually the most straightforward piece of the evidence package. The part that reportedly made the investigation room go genuinely quiet was what came next. The game data. Specifically, and this is where it gets really significant, a detailed breakdown of the Browns' performance metrics during the periods when Shedeur was on the field versus the periods when he was not. Win-loss record, offensive efficiency numbers, third down conversion rates, red zone productivity. the statistical comparison between a Cleveland offense operating with Shedeur Sanders at quarterback and a Cleveland offense operating without him laid out side by side in a format that makes the argument without needing a single word of commentary attached to it.
I had talked to Kevin during the summer about Shedeur and about Dylan to try to get a sense of where both were at heading into camp. And at no point during the conversation that I had with him did Kevin ever say anything negative about Shedeur. What he reinforced is what I said to you before, was that he probably needs to work a little bit harder. Here's the things that he needs to work on. He's a rookie quarterback. We see some potential for growth, and we're going to see where it goes. And people turn this into
Because here is what those numbers showed. And again, this is based on real, documented performance from last season. When Shedeur ultimately got his opportunity and played down the stretch, the Browns started winning football games. That is not a narrative. That is a fact that multiple reporters, analysts, and media personalities who covered Cleveland last season have confirmed on record. The team improved. The offense became more functional. The results on the field changed in a measurable, documented way. And those results came after a significant portion of the season during which the coaching staff made decisions that kept Shedeur off the field. Decisions that, according to the NFLPA player grade report, the players in that locker room disagreed with strongly enough to vote their head coach as the worst in the entire National Football League, the only C-, dead last out of 32 coaches. That grade came from somewhere. It came from players who watched those decisions get made and felt the consequences of them every single Sunday. Shedeur brought the numbers, the transcripts, and reportedly, sources say, internal communications that had made their way through proper channels, documenting specific instances of the friction between Stefanski's management approach and the broader locker room environment that the NFLPA grades later confirmed publicly. Now, I know what some of you were thinking. You were thinking, wait, is Shedeur trying to get Stefanski in real trouble here? Is this about revenge? Is this the kid going after a fired coach when the guy is already down? And that is a fair question that deserves a real answer. So here is the reframe that I think changes everything about how you look at Shedeur's decision to participate in this investigation the way he did. Shedeur Sanders did not initiate this investigation. The NFL did. He did not call for consequences against Stefanski. He responded to a formal league inquiry with documented evidence relevant to that inquiry. That is not revenge. That is cooperation with an official process. And the reason the evidence he brought carries the weight it carries is not because Shedeur assembled it to destroy someone. It is because the truth of what happened in Cleveland last season is already documented in press conference archives, game logs, statistical databases, and a player vote that produced the lowest coaching grade in the entire league. All Shedeur did was organize what already existed and present it to the people who asked for it. That is not the move of someone seeking vengeance. That is the move of someone who kept records, who paid attention, who understood from the beginning that the day might come when the documented truth would matter, and made sure he was prepared for that day when it arrived.
Question is Shedeur the Browns franchise quarterback? Can he still be franchise? Because the people I know tell me no. And I'll never give up. Now, if he goes and balls out in Vegas on Sunday, people change their tune. Some of them never will. The sheer amount of people that couldn't wait to call the voicemails and call this show and go on the chat for the Rizzo show and go, see.
And here is the part of this story that I think is the most quietly devastating for Stefanski's post-firing narrative. The investigation did not just create a problem for Stefanski legally or professionally, in terms of whatever league consequences may or may not follow. It created a problem for the story he was trying to tell about his tenure in Cleveland. Because the story Stefanski was telling in that interview, the "I loved coaching Shedeur, he was wired the right way, I'm rooting for him" story, requires a version of events where the relationship was fundamentally positive, where the friction was just a normal part of developing a young quarterback, where the decisions were football decisions made in good faith by a coach who believed in his player. The evidence Shedeur brought to that investigation tells a different version of the same events, a version supported by transcripts, by statistics, by the documented voice of 30-some professional football players who lived inside that environment every single day and voted accordingly when given the opportunity to evaluate their coaching staff anonymously and honestly. two versions of the same story, one told in a post-firing media interview by the man who made the decisions, the other assembled from the documented record of what those decisions actually produced. The investigation gets to decide which version holds up under scrutiny. And that exit, Shedeur leaving that building with the same energy he walked in with, without a statement, without drama, without a single word to the cameras waiting outside, is the image that captures everything about who Shedeur Sanders is in this moment, and what separates him from every version of this story that the doubters tried to write about him over the last 2 years. He came in prepared, he delivered what he had, and he walked out focused on the next thing. Because here is the truth about Shedeur Sanders that this entire Stefanski situation has made impossible to deny anymore. This is not a kid who operates on emotion. This is not a player who lets the noise of the outside world drive his decisions. This is someone who thinks clearly, acts strategically, keeps records when records matter, and trusts that the documented truth is a more powerful argument than anything he could say in a press conference or post on social media. The NFLPA gave Stefanski a C-. The locker room voted. The game logs showed what happened when Shedeur finally played. The press conference transcripts showed a month of his name never being spoken by the man responsible for his development. And now those documents are in front of the people running the investigation. Shedeur Sanders did not need to say anything. The receipts said it for him.
Meanwhile, while all of this was unfolding, while the investigation was running, while the sports media was generating takes from every direction, Shedeur was at a school, bringing pizzas, telling kids to get good grades and stay focused and take full advantage of every opportunity they have. That is where his energy went when he was not in that investigation room, not on social media, not in a beef with a fired coach, at a school with kids. That contrast between the noise swirling around him and the way he actually spends his time is the most important story here, and it is the one that gets buried every time somebody wants to make Shedeur Sanders the villain in a narrative that the documented evidence has consistently refused to support. The investigation will run its course. Consequences, or the absence of them, will be what they will be. And Kevin Stefanski will move on to whatever comes next in his coaching career, carrying a C- from his own players and a post-firing interview that created more problems than it solved. Shedeur Sanders will move on to a new season, new coaching staff, new opportunity. And based on everything we know about how this young man operates, with preparation, with documentation, with the kind of strategic clarity that most players twice his age never develop, that new chapter is going to be very, very interesting to watch. So here is what I want to leave you with, and drop this in the comments right now because I want to hear exactly where you land on this one. Does Shedeur Sanders bringing documented evidence to an NFL investigation make him the most prepared and strategically intelligent young quarterback in the league, or does participating this deeply in a formal process against a former coach create complications inside league circles that could affect how front offices view him going forward? And the one I really want your take on, if the investigation finds that Stefanski's post-firing comments did violate league protocols and consequences follow, does that moment officially close the Cleveland chapter for Shedeur and let him walk into the new season completely unburdened by everything that happened last year? Drop it in the comments. Every single one gets read on this channel, and this is one of those conversations that is going to run for days. If you want every update on this investigation, every development in the Shedeur Sanders story, and every chapter of what is shaping up to be one of the most compelling quarterback narratives in recent NFL history, make sure you are subscribed right now with that notification bell fully on, because this channel is where the story lives from the very beginning to wherever it ends up going. We will see you on the next one.